So yeah, my name's Peter, and I've been making little videos for quite a while now, and really enjoy talking to people about how really simple ways you can make effective videos just using a smartphone, a tablet. I mean, whatever you've got to hand, really. It doesn't have to be hugely technical. We've got just under an hour now, and I want to leave a little bit of time towards the end for questions. But please do, if you've got questions throughout, do put them in the chat. I'm not going to focus hugely on the technical side of it in terms of software and editing and things like that. But if you have questions about those, I can answer those in a follow-up email. So anything I don't cover, do feel free to ask those questions in the chat. What I'm going to focus on mostly are kind of some really key fundamentals that can really make a video much more watchable than it might be otherwise. So I'm going to talk a bit about what's your message, what is it you want to say, talk a bit about how to make a video look appealing and interesting, and how to avoid certain kind of pitfalls that people might fall into otherwise. I'll talk a little bit about sound and lighting, again, just the basics, just to what can make your video work. And then I'll talk a little bit at the end about sharing your video, how to make sure it gets out there and people watch it. Which is obviously quite an important thing. The first thing I want to do, this morning I went into my garden and I made two very short videos. One of them is better than the other one. Now, neither of them are comedically bad and neither of them are amazingly good. So I kind of wanted to just give an example of, you can just go out and in 30 seconds film something. But I'm going to show you both of them now, and then I'm going to invite you to pick which one you thought was better, just on your instinct. And then we're going to kind of talk through, okay, some of the things that maybe separated one from the other, and that will kind of be the basis of the workshop. And then we'll revisit them again at the end, and I'll talk through in a bit more detail why one might have been a bit more watchable than the other one. If you think neither of them are watchable, or if you think they're both great, then that's also useful to know as well. So I'm just going to share my screen, and hopefully you should see a big picture of my face. So this is video number one. I'm going to share this and it might be a bit quiet, so feel free to turn your volume up on your laptop. So here we go. Okay, so there's this bit at the end of the garden, and it's kind of got, there's a gate, and it's not technically, it's not part of the garden, but there's this weird gate thing. If we go through it, okay, doesn't open. Oh dear. Okay, so that was video number one. And I'm going to share the second one in just a second. So hopefully you could all see and hear that all right. So here is video number two. There's this gate through. Opens up. It's this weird space that we don't really know what it is or who owns it or what's in here. It's quite exciting. Okay, so that was a very, very brief example of two different videos. As I say, neither of them are kind of hugely different, but I'm just going to share a quick poll and just ask you to, without thinking about it too much, which of those videos do you think was better? Okay, so I'm just going to let people spend a minute to reply to that. Really don't think about it too hard, just your kind of gut instinct. And don't worry if you thought both of them were terrible. That's also useful to think about. I wasn't trying to make anything hugely polished. Okay, so we've had a good number of people respond. So here are the results of that. We have 97% of people thought video 2 was better, and 3%, that's one person thought video one was better. So I'd be very interested to hear why. But yes, unsurprisingly, video two was one that I was trying to do a little bit better. I mean, it wasn't something that I was putting a huge amount of time into, but I'm going to talk, that gives me a bit of a frame of reference to talk through the rest of what I'm going to share. So I will kind of refer back to why that second one felt instinctively better and more interesting. So first thing I'm going to talk about is this idea of messaging. So thinking about, okay, what is the story you want to tell? And I'm going to share my slides here. And this is a really helpful tool, that this kind of image I've got here. If you've got a pen and paper, feel free to jot it down and make some notes, but we'll share these afterwards. So really don't feel like you have to. But what this represents is a really helpful way just to plan out the message that you want to share in your video. So before you've even picked up your camera, think about, okay, what is it that I want to say? And there's three different ways you can interpret this, and I'm going to go through them. But I want you to think about the arrow on the left, the far point on the left. That's where your audience is starting when they're watching the video. And then the final point on the right, where it comes down to another point, that's where your audience is at the end of the video. So a kind of a classic way to think about this is with any story, beginning, middle, and end. Okay, so you're telling a story, whether or not it feels like a story, you are telling a story, and it will start with something. It might start with you saying, hi, that's a beginning. It could be as simple as that. And then you get on to the middle. So you talk about, okay, here's what we're actually sharing. And then the ending, just some indication that you're closing it down. Now, to think about it more in terms of making videos for action for a group, you're wanting the audience to do something. You can also think about it in this term. Okay, so you start with a hook. So what is it that you want people to think about or make them interested in what you're saying immediately? So in that second video, what I was trying to do is immediately talk about this idea of a kind of a secret garden at the end of my garden, and making it clear that it was visually, you could see that it was there, but that immediately makes it a little bit more interesting. And this could be if you're talking about an event, you mention we've got an event coming up, or talk about something that really appeals to the audience you're trying to reach. Then you can fill in the detail, and then you can end with the ask of what you're trying to get out of that towards the end. So you don't have to overthink it, and this can be 10 seconds. This really doesn't have to be a huge amount of detail, but this is a helpful way just to structure your thoughts. And then another way to think about it is from the perspective of the audience. So this is maybe their experience. At the beginning, they want to know, what am I getting from this video? What is this video going to give me? So you really want to put that front and center. This is what you're going to get here. I'm going to tell you about X, Y, Z. Then the middle bit, if you've kind of hooked them in and they're a bit interested, then you've got their attention, and then you can focus on, okay, so why do I care about this thing? What are you going to tell me or show me that makes me interested in this, that keeps me watching? Where is that kind of detail that fleshes out this idea or that story? And then by the end of it, I want to, as an audience member, I want to be coming away thinking, okay, so what do I need to do here? What am I being asked? Is it to sign a petition? Is it to come to an event? Is it to join a Facebook group or something like that? So really, what is that ask? And so this is a really helpful, clear way just to set out what your message is. So again, just these three little steps, that can be a really nice way to start. That can be done lots of different ways. Whenever I'm making a video or designing a workshop or anything like that, I always use that structure just to map where do I want people to be on that journey. And what that can also do is help you figure out, what do I not need to say? Because it's very easy to kind of waffle, to say too much, maybe do you feel like you have to introduce yourself and tell your life story at the beginning of the video and say, oh, hello, I'm this person and here's what I'm doing. But actually that might not necessarily be interesting or useful or relevant to the person that's watching it. You can go straight into, here's the hook. This is what I want you to know at the start of the video. So this can be a helpful way as well to take out, to remove stuff that maybe isn't that necessary. So again, if anyone's got any questions about that, or that doesn't quite make sense, do feel free to kind of mention that in the chat. But I'd say when you're planning your video, that's a really important way to start. So once you've got your message, and it might be a 10-second message, it might be a 30-second message, it might be a 2-minute message, then you can start thinking about, okay, well, how do I want this to look? How do I want the image to come across to people? Because this is a really important part of video making, is making the video clear. And we're not talking about making it kind of Oscar winning in terms of cinematography and lighting and making it look incredibly beautiful. That can make a difference to people whether they watch a video or not. But there are some fundamentals about what makes a video watchable. And I mean that in terms of both visually appealing, but also something that makes sense. So it's important that it's clear what people are supposed to be looking at in your video. So just as it needs to be clear what the message is, it needs to be really clear what people can see. So I'm going to ask you to do something practical now. If you've got a pen and paper, please grab one. If you haven't and you want to go grab one, just do that. Spend a few seconds just getting a pen and paper. But if you haven't got one to hand, or you don't know where that might be, you can do this in your head. But what I'm going to ask you to do is just, if you've got a bit of paper, just something like this, and if you haven't got one that's quite that size, you can just draw. I want you to draw a frame, so a landscape frame, so like this, so a rectangle like that, and imagine that's the frame of your camera. Draw a picture of yourself talking to the camera, and it can be really, really basic. But imagine you're videoing yourself. And just draw yourself talking to the camera. I'm not going to ask you, no one's going to have to share this, so don't worry, it doesn't have to be a work of art. No one ever has to see this other than you. But I just want you to think about, okay, so if I was filming myself, what's my instinct of how that frame should look? So don't overthink it, just think about it. And again, if you don't have pen and paper, just think about it in your head, how am I imagining that? And I'll give you another few seconds to that, and we're going to, I want you to keep that paper for the time being. We're going to come back to it in just a minute, but I think it's really important just to very instinctively do that bit of thinking. Okay, so hopefully everyone's finished their artwork. Now I'm going to share my screen again, and this is going to be another poll. So I'm going to share 9 pictures. You're going to see 9 pictures, and each of them is kind of numbered 1 to 9, as you can see here. So 1 to 2, 3 along the top, 4, 5, 6 along the middle, 7, 8, 9 along the bottom. And my question to you, and this is what I'll ask in the poll, is which image are you most drawn to? So it might not be the first image you look at. So I'm going to share the images for about 5 seconds. So it might not be the first one you see or the first one you notice, but just think to yourself, which is the one I'm drawn to? Maybe you look at it for a little bit longer, or you find yourself kind of fixating on it a little bit more. And again, don't overthink it. There's no right or wrong answers. The polls are all anonymous, so we won't know who said what. And there is no right answer. It's just an interesting, helpful way to sort of notice, what are we drawn to? So these are the numbers. So I'm going to share the images now. You've got 5 seconds. Okay, so figure out which number you were looking at. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And I'm going to share another poll and just ask you, okay, which of those images were you most drawn to?
I wonder if you could just share them again or not.
I will just share them again. Okay, here we go. So don't think about it too much. Give a little bit more time for people to answer the poll. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, I'll stop that there. So just another 5 seconds. People answer. And if you weren't able to use the poll, feel free to put your answer in the chat. But I will stop it there and share the results. So this is what we're seeing. We're seeing the majority of people went for 8. Vanessa's put in the chat as well, going for 8 as well. Some people for 5, and then it looks like 3 and 6. Some people for 2. So there's a real spread here. Rhiannon's gone for 5 as well. So let's just remind ourselves of what these were. So the reason I'm sharing this is because there's lots of different things that might draw our attention. So the most people went for 8. So we had 28% of people picking 8, and 8 was the image of the eyes. So this isn't terribly surprising. We are very drawn to eyes. So we're biologically and socially biased towards looking at eyes. This is what we look at when we look at a picture of a person. We look at their eyes first. We're very drawn to this. So this isn't terribly surprising. So this is useful to think about when we're making our videos, is acknowledging that if there's a face in this image, people are going to look at the eyes. So where are the eyes? And how do we factor that in to what we're doing? So what other things did people say? So some people, quite a few people went for 5. And 5 is the very middle of the image, and it's also quite a striking color. So this is about contrast. So we're also quite drawn to contrast. It's easy to see in the middle. Our eyes naturally focus towards the middle of an image as well. So there are some clues there as to what sort of things are people looking at. We also had a few people going for number 3. And the interesting thing about the reason we're drawn to eyes, Diane mentions color. Absolutely, it's really important. The thing about eyes is we're so in tuned to look at eyes. We even get drawn to things that don't look like eyes, but we recognize them to represent eyes. So this picture number 3 of someone's hand with a smiley face drawn on it, we know that that's not really a face, but our brain still recognizes the concept of a face on it, and we are still drawn to that. So that's a really powerful idea. And notice as well, so there's a picture here, number 4, with a person in. So a couple of people were drawn to that person, but the fact you can't really see their eyes very well means that we're usually less drawn to that kind of image. What else did we see? So there's a few people, just see what's in the chat. So a few people going for 6, which is really interesting. And I'd be curious as to why you felt you were drawn to number 6. But again, there's some really interesting color and contrast going in there. And there's a bit of repetition. So there's 3 things next to each other. And that's often quite an alluring thing to be looking at as well. So again, there's no right answer to this. This is not an exact science, but this is a helpful way to think about what is it that's in my image and what are people going to be looking at. I'm going to do another quick exercise. So I'm going to share you 4 pictures of myself that I took today, this morning. And again, I want you to think which of them are you most drawn to them? Which of them feels most visually appealing, which feels like a weird thing to say about pictures of myself, and I haven't done these in a way to make them feel particularly compelling. But again, just notice which take them all in and think which of these am I drawn to, which of them is easiest to look at, and then I'll run another poll and see whether there's a kind of a more of a consensus or a bit of a split. So here are my 4 images. Of me in a overcast Truro this morning. So I'll leave these up for a few seconds. Again, don't need to overthink it too much. Just 1, 2, 3, or 4. Which one are you most drawn to? Okay, that feels like a weird way to say it, but hopefully you understand what I mean. I'm going to stop that so you don't have to keep looking at that much longer, and I'll launch this poll. So again, which one were you most drawn to? So just give it a couple of seconds while you're answering that. Just see in the chat. Really good comment about the eyes show emotion. Again, that's one of the key reasons that we might look at something. And Nikki's point about colours and in focus for number 6. Yeah, in focus and contrast of focus and colors is a really good way to draw the eye. Okay, so what have we said? And again, if you can't use the poll, feel free to put your answer in the chat. So most people going for 2, some people going for 3, some people going for 4. So let's revisit what we said. So 2 is unsurprising. So this is the one that I think is the most conventionally normal, basically, in terms of composition. So even though I've kind of put a bit of a wild card in by slightly hiding behind a hedge, just to make it not look totally normal, this is where I'm a relatively easy size to look at here. Number 3, some people went for 3. 3 is a little bit intense. I'm a little bit close there, kind of filling up the frame. That can sometimes feel a little bit overwhelming. And some people going for 4 as well. So 4, the distance isn't too bad, but the top of my head is kind of cut out. It's a slightly awkward position. I'm not surprised that no one went for number 1, because that's a pretty terrible angle there, and it's quite a confusing and busy frame. But again, so none of these I'm saying are perfect. They've all got slightly, things that I think are slightly wrong with them or slightly off-putting. But I definitely think 2 for me as well is the one that is easiest for people to look at. So what I want to do now with your with the picture that you just drew is we're going to look at something which is the kind of limited amount of theory that I'm going to get into. There's a lot of interesting stuff out there, but some of it isn't always that useful. But this is something called the rule of thirds, which you might be familiar with. It's linked to something called the golden mean, which is a kind of a pattern that exists in nature. It's in shells. It's in the way plants form or storms form. It's a very familiar pattern for us, like the Fibonacci sequence, which you might have heard of, and we're kind of attuned to recognize it as visually pleasing. It's something that it taps into something that we can't necessarily control. But what this means is we like a combination of patterns, but also imbalance. So what I want you to do for your picture is draw 4 lines to split it into thirds, so horizontally and vertically. So if you can draw these lines, maybe a bit straighter than I've done here, over your image, and just see where are those intersections taking place in terms of your image. So again, I'm not going to ask anyone to share these, but what you might find when you are framing or when you are watching another video is thinking what we've already talked about eyes being a really important point of focus. They will often be around these intersections. So maybe you've drawn something like this, hopefully much better than I have here with my very rudimentary mouse drawing skills. And this is quite a normal way of framing something. So here we can see the eyes are where we're drawn to, and we are drawn to see things in these kind of positions. So it's not right in the middle, because right in the middle can be quite off-putting. If something is totally symmetrical, then that can look really appealing. But if it's even slightly off, it can be quite uncanny, and we can notice that there's something not quite right. So if you go for purely in the middle, pure symmetry, if you get it right, it can be really good. But if you get it wrong, it can really throw people off and make us feel a little bit uncomfortable without necessarily knowing why. So this is a really helpful way to do it. And it doesn't really matter, kind of how big or how small this is, as long as the eyes are there. So I've drawn, this is a fairly, I think, a good way to do it. Everything's in shot, you've got the whole face. But if we undo those, you could also do it a lot bigger. So maybe, the eyes are here we've got a mouth, and kind of the head is this size. Personally, I think this is a little bit too close, but this is still applying to the rule of thirds. This is still something that makes sense to us. We're drawn to it. It's not too bad. Similarly, you could go further out, and then you've got little eyes here and a head, and then maybe you've drawn a kind of a full body as well here. And that's quite a common way of interviewing people on television, for example. So that's okay. Here you might get into problems with maybe your arms aren't quite that long to be able to hold it that far away from you. So there's some, more physical limitations there. But that is a really helpful way to think about how am I going to frame myself in this video. If I'm holding up to myself, or if I'm filming someone else, or if I'm asking someone else to film me, that's a really helpful way to think about it. So think about your eyes as the subject of the image. That's what you want people to be looking at, because if they look at your eyes, they listen to you. As a really good comment in the chat said, we're drawn to, that's where the emotions are. So that's where we want to engage with someone. So that's what we want to say. So Dan said, what if the face was spot in the middle of the image? So my question there was, by face, what is the thing that is in the middle? If the eyes are right in the middle, so kind of, I'm doing it now with my camera, my eyes are right in the middle of my frame, and I look a little bit low. I don't know if you feel that. To me, I feel a little bit low in the frame. It looks a little bit strange. So if I'm just a little bit up, and if you think about those third lines coming across my camera frame here, my eyes are now kind of on that top line, and that feels a bit more natural. That's what we're used to seeing a little bit more. So I'd invite you, I mean, even just on your camera now, take a look at your face if you've got your camera on, and if you haven't, you can kind of just move it around and just have a little play and just think, okay, where's okay? Here's a bit, maybe this is a little bit close and that's a little bit intense, but you do that, and just, it's all about following your instincts. You know what looks good, but sometimes when we make a video, we're so focused on, okay, how is it supposed to look? What am I supposed to do? What do I want to say? We don't necessarily listen to that voice in our head that really knows what we like to look at and what we don't. Claire said, does left or right make any difference? No, not really. You can kind of be either side. It doesn't make a big difference. That's where maybe it comes into, okay, well, what else is in the frame? What's your background? So what do you want to be in front of or behind? Maybe there's a kind of a tree here or something. So that offers something else nice to look at. But when we're thinking about where we want to stand, thinking about the background is really important. And this all boils down to something I'm going to share. This is a very technical graph I'm going to share about how to decide what's most important in your image. So this is basically it. The most important thing is the subject of your video, or the subject of the image. So as I said, if it's you or someone talking, it's the eyes. The eyes are the subject. Maybe at some point you want to point at something else or point the camera at something else, and then that moves to that thing. But when it's on you or a person, it is the eyes. And this is the most important thing. So the subject, the thing you want people to be looking at, is the most important thing in the frame. Everything else is less important. Okay, so that's a really, really basic bit of information, really, really fundamental. Because if you've got too many things going on in the frame, or too many things you want people to look at, people will get confused. And you've probably seen this in videos you've seen or photos you've seen. Photos are a good example of, you've maybe been in the situation where you're trying to take a photo of an event, and there's kind of lots of people in a room and they're sitting down or standing up, and you're trying to take a photo that kind of captures everybody in the event, but they just look a bit rubbish. And the reason they look a bit rubbish is because you don't know where to look. You take a picture and there's just lots of people, and it's really not clear to us, what am I supposed to be looking at in this image? And it's the same for video. If it's confusing, if we don't know where we're supposed to be looking, we just turn off. We can't engage with it, and we'll go and watch something else or go and do something else. So that's a really useful thing to remember. What is the subject that you want people to be looking at? And how do you make sure you're constantly making that the most visually important thing? So the framing is really important. There's also the element of, where is your background? Make sure you haven't got a really messy background. I think my background here is a little bit messy. I probably wouldn't record a video here. There's a little bit too much going on. I can blur the background if I want to, but if I was recording a video, I'd maybe have a kind of a plain color, maybe a wall or a hedge or something like that. So it's nice, it's there, but it's not distracting people away from what I want them to be looking at, which is my eyes. So that's a really important part of it. There's a couple of other things I want to say about framing. Maggie's just asked about how you blur the video. So that's something you can do in Zoom. You might be able to do it on your camera, but it's not terribly important. So I can I can blur my video using a virtual background. So there you can see I've now blurred it. If you want to know how to do that and you're not sure, then I can put some information in the follow-up email. But it's just an example of removing any distractions. That's why people do that. So I'm going to just switch to, and I've got another video, I'm going to look on my phone. Just give me a second. So, and I'm going to spotlight myself. Hopefully you can see me here. So now, this is, I'm just going to give a couple of things about framing, but more about lighting and orientation. So you might be wondering about landscape or portrait. So landscape is like this. It's a sort of like a landscape painting, or we can go portrait, and now I'm looking like a portrait picture. So a portrait is, when we're using our phones, portrait can be the natural way we go because it's easier to hold a phone like that. If we're taking a selfie video, it's easy to go portrait. But it's important to think, where is this video going to go? Because portrait is, it can look a little bit less normal. We're more used to seeing things like this. This is how we see television, or we see the cinema, and most videos are online are like this. However, more and more we do see portrait videos on social media, maybe Facebook or Twitter or things like TikTok. And if you're interested in that, then great, you can do something like this. But what I would encourage you, if you're going to use portrait, use it for a reason. Otherwise, landscape is much easier. It's more familiar to people. So you just might think, how am I going to hold that if I'm taking a video of myself? Have a bit of a practice and make sure your hands are comfortable. And I also wanted to just demonstrate a few things about lighting. So if I go over here, now you can see you're getting a bit distracted by the very bright light in the video. So that just the light in my room. So forget the fact that it's quite a low angle. It's probably not terribly flattering for me, but this is an example of not very good lighting. So I can go even more, and then it starts to get very dark. So I'm not going to talk hugely about lighting. You can get separate lights. You can even use just a lamp out of shot, but it's really important that what you're supposed to be looking at is lit, so that it's clear. There's not too much darkness going on. You can have darkness in the background, but it's really important that, again, think about, what is the subject? What do I want people to be looking at? And is that lit clearly? And you can do all of that just by using natural lighting, the sun, or lights you might have in a room that you're in. So it's not something that you need to spend a huge amount of time thinking about, but it is really important to get right. So I'm going to come back and remove that spotlight and come back to gallery view. So there we go. Hopefully you can see me there. So that's a kind of mostly what I wanted to say about the framing. So the aesthetics, how you make a video visually appealing. So if you've got any questions about that, please do ask. And I think it's very easy to overthink that. But those are some of the really basic things that are key. I want to talk about sound now. Sound is really important, or it's really not important. So this is the kind of the paradox of sound. It's either one of the most important parts of your video, or it can be completely irrelevant. Because if you have sound, bad sound is one of the main reasons people will turn off a video. If they think they're supposed to be able to hear something and they can't hear it, then people will switch off. So if you've got someone talking and it's not very clear, or there's an aeroplane going overhead, it's very off-putting, and we don't like to listen to it. And if there's sort of sound dropping in and out, so when the first video I did, I know the sound wasn't great on either of them, and that's more of a computer issue than anything else. There was a bit when I was talking and opening a gate at the same time, and it made it really hard to hear what I was saying. So it was an example of kind of a bad sound. However, if you don't have sound in your video, then you can just forget about it completely, and you don't have to worry about it. A lot of people watch videos on social media, and they might even have the sound on their computer or their phone or whatever they're watching. So if you want to do talking, then it is important that you make sure that sound is clear. But if you want to get rid of talking completely and maybe have text on the screen, or you're just sort of showing something that can speak for itself, then I think that's really, really important. Just want to come back to, I see Kemi's got a question in the chat about different types of lighting on different types of faces, people who's with different skin tones. And that's something I'd really recommend playing around with. I think, you'll probably know better than anyone else what might make your face appear clearer, what kind of background you want to contrast against, what kind of lighting you need. And I really just encourage you to play around, get a lamp, get your phone and kind of move it around and just see what works well. There's no particular reason why anyone won't be able to get a kind of a nice, clear image of themselves, but absolutely it will be different in different circumstances for people. So coming back to sound, a really important thing to note about sound is that microphones pick up sound very differently to our ears. So if we're recording something and it sounds good to us, a microphone might hear it quite differently. It might hear that weird random saxophone playing that your neighbor is doing that's only kind of slightly in your ear and you can kind of tune it out, but actually when you listen to the video it's really, really dominant and terrible. Or it might pick up the wind in a way that your ear doesn't, because we're very good at tuning out that kind of background noise, but a microphone isn't as good at that. So the thing about listening is just play it, listen to it, and if it's not good enough, do it again. You can wear headphones so you can hear exactly what the microphone is hearing, which helps you get out of that trick of thinking that, oh, well, if I've heard it okay, then the camera will have heard it okay. So in most phones, you can plug in some headphones, listen to it, and then you're hearing exactly what the phone is hearing. You might not be able to do that if you're recording yourself, because it might look a bit strange, but if you're recording somebody else or someone else is recording you, you can do that. Otherwise, just record yourself, then listen to it back. And if there's a bit, if it's really, really great, but there's a bit where an ambulance drives past, you just do it again, because it's not worth it. People, if there's bad sound, people will switch off. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but it needs to be audible. Last thing I wanted to say about sound is it's very easy to do captions as well. So captions are subtitles effectively. So captions at the bottom that spell out what the person is saying. And I'll put some information about this on the follow-up email, but on social media for Twitter, for example, there's a really easy way to write captions just in a kind of a text file on a computer. And then you can upload that to Twitter along with a video and it will automatically put it on. So it's not something you have to think about in too much detail. There's a really easy template to follow. And that can sometimes be a really good way to make your videos more accessible to people who either can't hear because they don't have audio on their computer or for any other reason, they might not be able to hear what you're saying. So that's really helpful. But again, it's thinking about, where is this video going? Who is it? Who's going to see it? How do I make it as accessible to so that the most people will see it? So now I want to get on to sharing, and I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes on this before we get to kind of Q&A. So I'm going to share my screen again. Here's a really useful rule before you share. The beware of trains bit is useful information. That's not relevant here. That's just a kind of a sub bit of advice. But stop, look, listen. This is a really helpful thing to think about when you've made your video before you go to share it. So you stop and think, just pause before you upload it, before you share it. Look at it, watch it again. Does it make sense? Is there anything that could be better? Is it clear what's going to be, what someone should be taking from it, how it looks? And listen, so ask for feedback. Ask someone else who you trust their opinion. Here's the video. Does it make sense? Is it clear what's being said? Do you know what to do at the end of this video? And listen to their feedback. And if they say, sort of, ask them, okay, what doesn't work? What needs to be better? And just do it. If you're making a video that's only a minute long, it really doesn't take a lot of time to redo it, go over it again. If you're making something that's a bit longer and requires lots of people, and maybe you don't want to have people waiting around for too many minutes or hours getting it right, then you can do that very quickly. You know, record it, watch it back there, and then show it to somebody else and listen to their feedback. Once you're ready to share the video.
Peter, I was just going to say, I guess what we are talking about here is videos that you do in one shot on your phone, right? So we're not really getting into the complexities of editing, although there are simple ways to do that, but mainly here talking about that kind of basically getting it in one shot. And that is one of the easiest ways to create a simple video so that you don't have to think about editing.
Yeah, absolutely. And editing, there are lots of easy ways to do it on your phone, on a computer, but it does immediately make things a lot more complicated. If you can make a video that's just you talking, someone else talking, or just showing something, and you can move it around, you know, as long as it's clear what someone's supposed to be looking at, you don't have to make those cuts. You can talk, show something else, come back. And it's very easy and quick to do that. Then you can, it's just a file on your phone, you can show it to people and watch it back without the need for that editing. Last thing I want to say is a little bit about, okay, what does sharing it mean? What does that look like? And you might be familiar with the phrase of going viral, a video going viral. That's not necessarily the goal we want to get to. We're not expecting millions and millions of hits on every single video that we get out there, but it is useful to understand what that actually means, because that helps us understand, okay, how are we going to share this video? So think about where we're going to put it. So in this image, this first dot, this purple dot, this represents you. Okay, so you've got the video and then you send it out to all of these people in blue. So these are the people you are sharing it with. Maybe it's your Facebook followers or your Twitter followers or any other group of people. It doesn't have to be on social media. There's a number of people you're going to share that with. A smaller subsection of those people are going to be the people who see the video. So not everybody you share it with will see it, but some of those people will come up on their feed or whatever they'll give it the time to look at it. And then a smaller group of that will watch it. So they'll be the people who see it come up and decide to sit and watch it. Then you get an even smaller subsection of those people who share the video. So we're not expecting everyone you share it with to see it or to share it, but hopefully it will kind of whittle down enough. There will be some people who watch your video who share it on. Then the theory of it going viral or kind of getting more and more views is if each of those orange people who share the video become a purple one, then in theory, they're going to share it with twice the number of people that you shared it with. And so twice the number of people who will see it, and then people who watch it and then share it. And so every single cycle, more and more people will be sharing it. And this is how videos go viral. So this isn't necessarily what you're aiming for. You know, you might be aiming for a certain audience or a certain number of people to watch it. But what this is hopefully explaining is that it's the sharing that's really, really useful. If you can ask people to share it, either in the video or maybe when you share it with them, please share this video. That's the thing that can really make a difference. And the more and more people share it, the more and more people will watch it. And then in theory, the more and more people will share it again. So if you focus on one thing when you get your video out there, it's that asking people to share it, asking for it to get shared with more and more networks. And eventually it'll fizzle out, either because you've reached every single person in the world and there's no one else to share it with anymore, or just those networks aren't expanding anymore and everybody's sharing it to people who've already seen it, and then it just kind of, you know, it finishes. But that's fine. You know, it doesn't need to be seen by everybody, but that's a helpful way of kind of promoting it. So we've had a bit of a whistle-stop tour through DIY video making, and I want to leave a little bit of space for questions and any kind of comments we haven't covered. But just to reiterate the key things I think that we've sort of covered here, it's thinking about, okay, so what is your story? What do you want to tell people? And make it as simple as possible. And that 3-part structure is really useful. Think about, what are people going to be looking at when they're watching this? What do I look at when I watch this? What am I looking at when I'm watching other videos? And again, making it really clear what people should be looking at. The clearer it is, the easier it will be for people to watch it. And then thirdly, sound, lighting, all of these things are important, but they're easy to do well. They're easy to do badly as well, but they're easy to do well enough that a video can work. And if you want to be more technical, you can get more advice and more expertise and more gadgets and software, but it's easy to do that well. It just requires a little bit of thinking, watching back. And if you think it isn't quite as good as it needs to be, just do it again. So I think those are the kind of the really key things I would say. So really happy to answer any questions now, anything that might have not made sense to people. and I can use the two videos I shared at the beginning as an example if that's useful again. But I think we talked through a little bit about what worked and what didn't work with those. So if there's any questions in the chat that we haven't answered, please do ask them again, or any that need a bit more answering, again, please ask, or if anybody wants to unmute and jump in as well. We've got a little bit of time to focus. And I really encourage, there's no such thing as a stupid question here. It's really, if you still feel like, oh, well, I'm not sure about X, Y, and Z, please do ask, because these things can be very, very simple to do. And the confidence just grows with practicing, trying it out, experimenting, doing it, watching it back, seeing what worked, seeing what didn't, and just trusting your instincts. You know what makes a good video, because we've all seen videos, and we've all seen videos that we like, and we've all seen videos that we don't like. And trusting our instincts on that, which hopefully this workshop has kind of encouraged you to do, is a really important part. So there's a few questions. Alison's shared a really useful phone app that you can use to edit. That's great. Again, there are some really good ones out there. Absolutely encourage you to have a look at those. We can put some links in the chat. Maggie's mentioned about not knowing how to edit. Again, you don't have to do it, but once you feel comfortable, it's something that can be quite easy, so we can share some information about that. Cecile's asked about an ideal length. Again, it depends on what you're trying to do. If you're sharing it with an audience that isn't expecting the video, so say on social media, then a roughly 30 seconds to a minute is usually a kind of a good length. But if you're sharing it to people who are expecting it, say your funders or something like that, then they might be more committed to watching something that's about 3 minutes long, for example. But again, also be drawn to, well, how long do I need to tell the story that I want to tell? That's also important. Hillary's asked if humor is good in a video. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, depends on the context, I guess. Probably not every video it's appropriate for, but it's a really a nice way of drawing people in and engaging them. In the same way that we like to look at people's eyes, we also like to laugh, and we like to find things funny. So that's great. Kit's asked about, is it essential to have a person talking to the camera, or is a voiceover okay? I think it's good to have a person talking if you can in a bit, because it gives people that focus so they know who they're listening to. But you could be showing something and talking, and that can work as well. But just think about, well, if someone's watching this without the sound on it, are they going to know that there is sound? If you can see someone talking and you can't hear it, you know that, okay, I'll turn the volume up and I'll be able to hear what they're saying. So again, just think about the experience of the person who's watching it. So another question about simple editing apps. That's great. And there's a few other comments, but David, I see you've got your hand up, so I'll come to you and then I'll try and answer the rest of the questions in the chat.
Just in terms of kind of good practice, I've been very struck by 350.org. They're short videos that they put out on social media. So if you go to their website, or if you sign up to their thing, they're nearly always between 1 and 2 minutes, really, really, really short. And all those points you're making, Peter, such a lovely session tonight. One thing I wonder about is the thing about the wind on the microphones if you're using a phone, and what you recommend. You can get little tie clip mics even with a cable. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely.
Something to sort of cover it up so that it doesn't get wind.
Yeah, mics, you can get a good mic for £30, £35. If you've got budget to spend on it, that's great. If you haven't, then you can use some very rudimentary technology like your hand to cover the microphone to block the wind. That can sometimes do the job. It really depends on how bad it is. If you can't get the wind out of the audio, you're going to have to move somewhere else, basically. But again, listen to what you've recorded, and if the wind is still there, go somewhere else, because wind can absolutely ruin a video. Mics can help. If you've got some money to get a mic, it's a good investment, but it's not essential. You could go indoors, or you can go behind a wall or something like that, or just use someone else to be a bit of a wind block. Kind of put yourself in the perspective of their camera, of the microphone. I need to be protected. I need to be able to hear this thing that's really important. There's also a question from Claire in the chat also about mics and recording. So about recording natural sounds. So yeah, maybe water running or birds. Mics can be really useful for that. If you want to pick up a really specific sound, especially one that maybe we're less used to hearing than a human voice, then a mic can be really helpful, because otherwise it's quite hard to distract. But again, try it out. Record what you want to record, play it back, listen to it. Does it make sense? Is it clear? If it is, great. Get a second opinion. If it's not, then we'll need to think about another way of maybe doing that. But yeah, thank you, David, for that question, and thanks, Rhiannon, for answering the question about presenting on Zoom. Should you sit off center? Yeah, that can help. But also, I mean, I sometimes try and do that, but then I'm kind of fidgety when I move. So I just kind of give up after a while. So I wouldn't necessarily worry too much about side to side, but it's quite helpful to think about your eye line level. Because again, you've probably been on Zoom calls with people who are a bit like this, and it's sometimes a bit weird, and then they kind of disappear off the camera, and then you're, what's going on there? And also the kind of the slumpers, we've all sort of done that, of people who look a bit like this on camera. And that's quite weird. It's not a very pleasant thing to look at. So that can sometimes be quite a helpful way to think about how your image is coming across. But also sometimes it's a bit weird looking at yourself on a Zoom call, isn't it? So I wouldn't worry too much about it there, unless it's being recorded and it's going to be shared. It's maybe less important. So we're nearly at time. We'll kind of come back to some of the technical questions in the follow-up email and share some links and things like that. But is there anything else anybody wants to know? Richard, I see you got your hand up.
Yeah. This. I mean, the project that we're doing for the money that we got from we're doing a video regarding our project, which is a solar generator, and just wondering, how much do you want from us? What sort of, how long would you want the film to be? Can you hear me?
Yes. So is this a question about a specific transition together video?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Rhiannon, do you want to come to that, or should you?
Yeah. So Richard, we will be staying on those of us that are making those specific project videos after this call. Right, so I think what we'll do now is we'll move to closing, if that's all right, because we're on time. And so those of you that are transition groups that are staying on to help make the seed funding related videos, please stay on the call. Everyone else, thank you so much for joining us. I hope it's been a really helpful workshop for you. Peter's done an amazing whistle stop tour there for you. And just to let you know, our next big event coming up is going to be the Together We Can event. This is following on from our What Next Summit last year. It's going to be 2 whole weeks of amazing workshops, inspiring stories, events from lots of different interesting speakers, lots of really useful skill shares. So do get that date in your diary.